While this is working, I want to make one thing clear. History is a mess. It's a confusing bundle of connections that make no sense. Even if you think you know what sounds real, you're often mistaken. There is no real way to tell if one factor actually led to a specific outcome. Take real quick Czechoslovakia. Was its split caused by Shirley Temple being removed as ambassador from the United States? Was Yugoslavia's severing caused by a farmer who got a glass bottle stuck up his anus? Both of these are logical causes, but just because one has a shorter string of events than the other doesn't make one more true than the other. So try to keep an open mind. Okay, AI art isn't the catch-all I thought it would be. Long ago, in ancient China, the invention of woodblock printing in the 2nd century AD would have ripples across time in the most unforeseen ways. By the 9th century, the Tang dynasty had utilized this invention to make small pieces of uniform paper with patterns on them roughly the size of a hand, and use them to play what was called the leaf game. This is the first recorded instance of what would become playing cards. The exact date it started is unknown, but the exact date a set of reliefs were impounded is known. This would be a little under 100 years before their first recorded appearance in Europe. That appearance was them being formally banned in Florence, a full 63 years before Gutenberg invented the movable type press. Most of the early records of playing cards in Europe is principalities banning their usage. Now, despite the first real mention of playing cards as them being made illegal, they would still spread rapidly across Europe. First, Noddy in the 16th century, which evolved into cribbage in the 17th, which was a particular favorite of one John Montagu, who would play it for so long non-stop that he would have his servants make him a particular dish that he could eat with one hand while keeping the playing cards in the other. Now I know what you're thinking. A meat pie, right? They fit all the criteria and they would be everywhere. I mean, I know of at least 7 regional variations around the world, and I've been eating Salteñas while working on this. But no, it was just something simple, something that wouldn't take his pertussis racked servants too long to make, just some cold meat between 2 slices of bread. This dish would later grow in popularity and would take its name from his title, the 4th Earl of Sandwich. Now back to card games and the bad decisions involved. In a nearby nation, a little problem was happening. You see, the nobles of this country loved these card games. Also, their money. But these things did not go well together as they were bad at keeping that money. They had already spent 1.3 billion livres to help the fledgling American colonies in their war against their parent nation of Great Britain, the inventors of the sandwich. Real quick here, that number, 1.3 billion, that's not converted into modern currency. If it was, that is 13 billion US dollars. This nearly bankrupted them, and after several years of failed harvests, the noble classes, now squeezing the common folk for every denier even though the price of bread was at an all-time high, the common man took a page from the Americans and had a revolution. This revolution would end with 2 major details to note here. First, a large number of nobles received very quick and very poorly aimed haircuts, and second, the staff of these nobles were now unemployed. Amongst these unemployed staff was a class of people whose skills were highly sought after. The chefs. Chefs were highly trained members of the merchant class, and now, with the nobles gone, had no work. The very concept of a restaurant was not something that really existed at the time. There were a few, but for the most part, if you wanted to buy food at an establishment, you would just eat what they had. They wouldn't take special orders or even normal orders. It was usually a bowl of perpetual stew and maybe some bread and cheese. In the upscale places, you might be able to pay a set fee and sit at a table loaded up with fresh-made food. Well, after the drastic height adjustment of the French aristocracy, these chefs began to open their own mercantile establishments where you could choose from a list of foods that would be prepared special just for you. Restaurants, delicatessens, and eating houses exploded across France, and then the rest of Europe. Now, I have sped through about 1,000 years of history so far. The next part requires a more focused eye to show the utter insanity of connected events. Now, about 100 years after the lovely woman who never actually said let them eat cake had some major wig adjustments done, A couple of Serbian officers were tired of the current reigning monarch and began a secret society to retake power and control of their country from the improper and undignified king and queen and replace them with someone more in line with their thinking. Unfortunately, this plan worked and then backfired as the coup led to a small war and even more consolidation of the Serbian power in the wrong hands. Learning nothing, they began to plan a violent removal of a visiting dignitary to show their disdain for foreign interference in their nation. A small group of other revolutionaries heard about this and had the same idea. 26 of them created a plan to assassinate the dignitary on his trip to the town hall. Only 5 people showed up, and 2 of them had tuberculosis. Also, only 2 of the people involved were over the age of 20, not the same 2. This group was what amounted to a fan club dedicated to the original cabal and was made up of teenagers. The ringleader handed out 3 bombs, 2 guns, and cyanide pills, and strategically positioned everyone to give them the best chances of completing their mission. When the parade group set off, they left behind half of their security team by accident. The motorcade pulled up to the first man who had a bomb, and passed him. Then the second man with a bomb and a gun, and passed him. Then the brother of the second man, he managed to throw his bomb and missed, blowing up the car behind them. With this dismal failure, the third man swallowed a cyanide pill and threw himself into the river. Problem was, the pill was expired, so it just made him vomit, and second, the river was 6 inches deep, so the police quickly fished him out and took him to the station. Now, this next part is somewhat interesting, and sources disagree, but the last person only had a gun, and when the bomb exploded, the motorcade increased its speed to avoid any other incidents right to the town hall. The dignitary gave his speech after the blood-splattered notes were retrieved from the car behind them, and the decision was made for him to visit the injured people in the hospital nearby. A secure route was set up to get them there, and then the security team got lost. When turning down a narrow alley, the lead car stopped to change course and stalled the engine out, with the dignitary's car behind them stuck in the middle, directly in front of a delicatessen where the last man was eating a sandwich. Two shots killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife. Before the assassin could finish himself off, the bodyguards managed to subdue and arrest him. With that, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Russia moves troops to help Serbia. Germany asks France if they will remain neutral if it goes to war with Russia, and then the next day declares war on Russia. France declines and Germany goes to war with them, telling Belgium that it will be moving troops through their land whether they like it or not. Well, England, who's allied with Belgium, declares war on Germany in response. Austria-Hungary then declares war on Russia. Britain declares war against Austria-Hungary. Japan gets in on the action and also declares war on Germany and Austria-Hungary. A world war takes place that lasts 4 years, and it only gets worse. To make a lot of confusing pointing arrows simple, all you need to know for this video is that Japan switched sides against England, France, and the United States, and was rewarded with having 2 of their cities reduced to rubble by the very first atomic bombs. When Japan formally surrendered, almost their entire constitution was rewritten by Americans in an attempt to prevent the rising militarism that led to its involvement in both world wars. An unintentional repercussion of this demilitarization of Japan was their entire propaganda department now found themselves unemployed. But these men and women would lay the groundwork for an economic miracle. Their skill in persuasion and art allowed new Japanese businesses to explode, and soon after the demand for Japanese-made goods would skyrocket around the globe. But not only was there a demand for Japanese goods, there was a demand in Japan for foreign goods. This demand would get people in trouble as there was a law that was never repealed from the 1907 Criminal Code. Article 175 states, quote, "A person who sells or displays in public an obscene document, drawing, or object shall be punished by imprisonment for not more than 2 years, with a caveat that the same would apply for possession with the intent to sell." This got a Japanese publisher in hot water for the translation of Lady Chatterley's Lover. a case that took 4 years to come to the final verdict and would set the standards for what was and was not considered obscene. Now remember, all those unemployed artists? Well, with all these new sales and production going on everywhere, there was a massive market for niche art. And ask any artist today what niche art usually means. Yeah, that. But they had a problem. They couldn't make and sell their most lucrative goods without running afoul of Article 175. So, how did they get around it? Well, simple. Non-direct and substitution. Hailing back to 1814 was the perfect loophole to exploit. And man, did they. From the invention of the woodblock press, to overeager nobility being terrible with money, leading to 2 world wars and a nation destroyed and rebuilt, ends with a woman and an octopus from 1814. The strings of history make an ugly sweater that defies logic.